Senator Coons, if you were the president of the United States, what is the conversation you would be having with Prime Minister Netanyahu tonight?
I would be pressing Prime Minister Netanyahu very hard to finally come to a ceasefire, to secure humanitarian aid and relief for the suffering Palestinian people of Gaza, to secure the release of the remaining nearly 24 living hostages, and to put together a framework for achieving lasting peace for the Middle East. After the strikes on Iran, after President Trump showed he was willing to take great risks to support Netanyahu's direction and agenda, and frankly, after Hezbollah, Iran, and Hamas have all been significantly weakened by military action, the president should be pushing Netanyahu to finally recognize it's time for this war in Gaza, started by Hamas nearly 2 years ago on October 7th, to be brought to an end.
Senator, I'd agree with that. I can see President Coons making that point and stressing that point, but President Trump
That's
is
the first time I've ever heard that phrase.
Well, President Trump is not President Coons. And so my question to you, sir, is this is this more the tail wagging the dog? You've got so many other narratives that are really kind of driving both the storylines around Gaza and what's happening there, as well as Iran. For example, you've got headlines: Israeli officials think Trump could give them a green light to attack Iran again, noting Israeli officials say Netanyahu wants to reach understandings with Trump about future U.S. nuclear negotiations with Iran and on possible scenarios that would justify renewed Israeli military strikes. So it seems like the policy is being set by Netanyahu, as opposed to, as you've described it, the president sort of laying down what needs to happen in order for the U.S. to continue to back efforts in both Gaza and Iran.
Look, there is a real chance here for lasting regional peace. And Netanyahu just needs to grasp that moment. And President Trump needs to press him to grasp that moment. Netanyahu, for his own personal reasons, has long placed securing the release of the hostages still held in Gaza by Hamas below a lot of other objectives. But he's got the chance now to achieve what is a significant path forward, which is reconciliation with Saudi Arabia, a very real end to the Arab-Israeli conflict, now decades old, and a lasting security and economic alignment between Israel and most of the Gulf states, most of the Arab states of the region. But he cannot do that without a credible path forward towards Palestinian self-governance. If President Trump gives him the kinds of assurances of Israeli security and of lasting American support that I expect Netanyahu is seeking, then he ought to be demanding in return a real path towards peace, something Netanyahu has just refused to pursue for several years.
This is the draft proposal, and these are details sent by one of the Hamas mediators to that were obtained by the Associated Press. This truce would last 60 days. There would be the release of 10 living hostages, release of the remains of 18 hostages, Palestinian prisoners exchanged for Israeli hostages, ramped up humanitarian aid entering Gaza. Israeli forces would withdraw to a buffer zone and start negotiations to end the war. All that being said, look, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu does not believe in the security of the Palestinian people, in a Palestinian state. He doesn't believe in that. And so and we're looking at live photos right now of the dinner that is happening between President Trump and Netanyahu. We're going to ask the control room if we have audio, and if so, we will bring it. But we have audio, so we'll dip in. Are we dipping in? We're going to monitor, and then we'll dip in shortly. But, Senator, I guess I have to ask you, Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition is a conservative, a right-wing coalition that one of their tenets is that not only they don't believe in a two-state solution. So how exactly is the peace everyone is talking about going to come to fruition?
It is exceptionally difficult, and it is almost impossible with the current governing coalition. Two members of Netanyahu's cabinet Minister Smotrich and Minister Ben-Gvir have said repeatedly that they will leave the government, which could cause it to collapse if he were to go ahead with anything resembling peace with the Palestinians. But Yair Lapid and several opposition leaders have recently said they would join a government of national unity if that's what it takes to achieve a lasting peace in Gaza and to forestall a possible annexation attempt of the West Bank. This is a critical moment. And the very conservative, very right-wing coalition that supports the Netanyahu government will not make peace, a lasting peace with the Palestinians. You're absolutely right about that, Simone. So, frankly, the United States has a chance here to help broker what could be an enduring peace. And a key part of that is negotiations with Iran. President Trump was far too quick to declare mission accomplished, just like George Bush in the first months after the war in Iraq, and to declare that all of Iran's nuclear weapons program, its enrichment program, had been obliterated. We don't know that for sure yet. We need to get credible, nonpartisan, non-political intelligence from the ground in Iran, and that requires getting inspectors back into these facilities. And so I'm encouraged that there is an opening towards negotiations with Iran by a senior representative of the Trump administration. But that's the path forward here, is to secure a lasting end to Iran's nuclear enrichment program and to try and deal with their ballistic missiles and their support for terrorist proxies in the region. If what Trump and Netanyahu are talking about is that sort of a concerted effort to negotiate a lasting end to Iran's threat to Israel's existence, that should be a significant step forward for those concerned about the stability and security of Israel and of peace in the region.